In my opinion, sir, any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. That was Lieutenant Colonel Jack Churchill. My name is Kevin, and this is History Goon. Now, I promised this guy to end the season. And you know what that means? No, there's still another episode. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do you dirty like that. That's mean. I was really looking at it, and last year I ended on a guy, but before that I did an event. So I was like, let's flip it. Let's end on the event this time, because the event, pretty big. That's a very big episode that I've got a lot of work into, and I need to kind of tighten it up, get it really ready for everybody. This one, on the other hand, we can play fast and loose because the guy is a maniac and he's so much fun to talk about. Before we go too far, I need to share his entire name, okay? Because it's, without a doubt, probably the most British arrangement of words that I've ever seen put to paper. Jack Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill. It doesn't get any more British than that. And I know what you're thinking, right? That last name is going to come up again, probably. You're right. And we'll get there when we get there. Jack Churchill is born September 16th, 1906, in Dormansland, Surrey. His father, Alex Churchill, was director of the public works in the colonial service and was posted to Hong Kong and Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka now, I believe. Which is why a lot of different sources will have different birth locations for him. Some will say Hong Kong or Sri Lanka or the English countryside in Surrey, kind of depending on which one you read. I kind of came to the conclusion that he was born in England. And his dad was just never there. Because his dad likes to display the classic British colonial energy of, I've had a child. I must not be there to see it because I've got things to do for the Queen. Queen, right? Maybe a king? 1906? King, yeah. Yeah. Whichever lizard with a crown it was. He had a couple of brothers who also had incredibly British names. Thomas Bell Lindsay Churchill, who would go on to become a major general and join the British Commandos, which is kind of a huge thing. And Robert Alec Farquhar Churchill, who went by the very prestigious moniker of Buster. He joined the Royal Navy and flew with the Fleet Air Arm and was shot down off the coast of Malta during Operation Pedestal in 1942. So what that means is we have 3 Churchill brothers that are all about to fight in the same war. Spoiler alert, it's World War II. If you didn't guess by, getting shot down over Malta or the Commandos, because they weren't a thing during World War I. Jack attended the Dragon School at Oxford, which is actually like an ancient prep school that exists specifically for producing men who wear full dress uniforms in combat. Unfortunately, not a Witcher school like I really wanted it to be, because that would have been way cooler. We just had like Jack Churchill, the Witcher. He would have made Geralt look like a bitch by the time we get done with this, and you'll understand why. He then attended King William's College on the Isle of Man, which sounds like a place that Freddie Mercury would have loved. And I'm saying that as a joke because I love Queen, and Freddie Mercury is probably one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And from there, he went to Sandhurst, where he graduated in 1926 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment, which is a lot to say. From here, he gets sent to Burma, which is now, oh God, Myanmar? I think it's Myanmar now. When he arrived in Rangoon, his regiment's primary job was what the British Army called flag marches. So they're sailing up and down the Irrawaddy River on boats, rolling into villages, reminding the locals that His Majesty's government is still very much in charge and would like everyone to just maybe don't be bandits. You know, this is ringing a bell if you've ever watched, was it The Dark Knight Rises? Where Alfred was talking about his time in Burma during World War II. The kid with an emerald the size of his fist and men wanting to watch the world burn. I'm not saying that Alfred is based on Jack Churchill, but from some stuff that I've seen people talk about with like Alfred lore from the Batman comic books, he might have been, because apparently Alfred was a badass in World War II. And then he fought Superman, which I just learned about recently, and like beat the dog shit out of him for a bit. Alfred's a crazy old man. And because this is not what he wants to do, he's about to find something that he wants to do. He bought a Zenith motorcycle and just kind of started riding it all over the place. On one occasion, he completed a 1,500-mile round trip from Rangoon to Pune, which is across the Indian subcontinent, over roads that ranged everywhere from bad to non-existent. And on part of this journey, he hit a water buffalo on a motorcycle, which water buffaloes are big. Motorcycles are not. I mean, I've seen people hit deer on motorcycles before, like videos of it, and the deer just kind of like, pooh, like go flying up into the, because they weigh like 130 pounds. This has got to be like hitting a meat wall almost. So he gets up, dusts himself off, and just stares at this water buffalo. The water buffalo stares back at him, and they both kind of come to the conclusion that this is probably not a fight worth having. Very smart move on the water buffalo's part. Spoiler alert. They go their separate ways. He gets back on his bike and takes back off. Another thing to address with this guy and his motorcycle is the fact that India has a lot of railways, and obviously you have to have bridges for trains. And if there's not road bridges, there's train bridges to get across rivers. He would get his motorcycle up on one of the rails of the train tracks and walk through, what do they call them? Sleepers, I think? Railroad ties. But because the source that I used is British, they called them sleepers. That's kind of what I refer to them as here, but it's the same thing. So anyway, he would get his motorcycle up on the train track and then walk across the ties across these bridges. There's a very thin line between ballsy and stupid, and he lives most of his life right on that razor's edge. Another thing he did while he was in Burma was became pretty good friends with the pipe major of the Queen's own Cameron Highlanders. And he decided, for no reason other than because he was bored and it seemed difficult, that he's going to learn how to play bagpipes. And he genuinely became good, like a really good piper. Well, here he earned his India General Service Medal with Burma clasp for his service in the 1930 Burmese Rebellion. And then we have peace after like 1930. And with peace comes boredom for guys like him. After a decade in the military, he resigns his commission in 1936. Not a very fun episode, I know. He was in the military for 10 years and didn't really do anything exciting other than hit a water buffalo. Just kidding. According to his biographer and friend, Rex King Clark, who would eventually write a book about him, obviously being a biographer, he basically describes this period in Jack's life as a man who is so unsuited for boredom that he just starts doing really bizarre activities and dangerous to keep himself busy until another war starts. First, he went to Nairobi, where he spent a little bit of time working as a newspaper editor. He hated it, moved on, because editing a newspaper sounds boring. He did some editorial modeling for magazines. He appeared as an extra in a couple of movies. He got himself a cameo in a movie called A Yank at Oxford, where he played one of the oarsmen on a boat in the Oxford rowing shell, alongside star of the movie Robert Taylor. And he got this role because they needed someone who actually knew how to row. And he had rowed the River Isis. And after finding out that this man is oh, he's done this before, cool, let's just have him show everybody else how to do it. But to go back to the current place and time where we are, another thing he did was he started competing in military pipe competitions. In the summer of 1938, he placed second in the officers' class at the Aldershot Championships. He was the only Englishman in a field of about 70 competitors. Almost all of them were Scottish, because it's bagpipes. There's nobody that can out-bagpipe Scottish people. I would go out on a limb to say that. It's kind of their thing. They created it. Historically, maybe they didn't create it. I don't know. They perfected it, okay? I was going to say, they'd be like saying, oh, I can find somebody better at an American than baseball, the Japanese, but the Puerto Rico, or Dominicans, we're not really that good at baseball. We took a bunch of accountants and got really good at cricket, though. So, suck it, Pakistan, or whoever they beat in the finals. I don't know. I don't watch cricket. So, the fact that he placed second means that there's about 68 Scotsmen that came in behind him as the only Englishman in the competition, and he beat them with their own instrument, which, being English, they have a history of doing that to the Scots and the Irish and anyone else they've come into contact with. Except the Irish, they beat them with potatoes. So then the Irish started beating them with motorcycles and ball bearings, but we'll get there some point in time. Now we'll get into the archery, because the archery, like I said before, is going to be kind of a big thing. He really got into it after he came home from Burma, and he's one of these guys where when he finds a hobby, he's going to become the best at it. Not that he can be. He's going to become the best at it. Period. Full stop. He got good enough in a very short period of time that he got to represent England at an international competition in 1939. That international competition being the World Archery Championships in Oslo, Norway. Another thing happened in 1939, specifically on September 1st, when the Wehrmacht rolled across the border into Poland and ruined the professional archery career of Jack Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill. And somebody's going to pay for that. Once he heard about the invasion, Jack said, quote, "I was back in my red coat, the country having gotten into a bit of a jam in my absence." Jack Churchill is the main character. I mean, there is nobody that has better plot armor in the history of World War II than Jack Churchill. Maybe Patty Mayne, I don't know. And there's a reason, okay? It's going to sound weird, because as an American, we have a lot of incredible stories of Americans that fought in World War II. Guys that were just super badass, doing wild stuff. For some reason, I can't figure out in my own head I'm more fascinated by what the Brits did in World War II, not because they were better at it than Americans, because they were both really good at it, but the Brits came at it from a different angle. Like, they just did weird. I mean, you don't read about any Americans like going into combat with a umbrella and walking across the street with a under mortar fire and being like, I've got an umbrella, they can't hurt me. Or jumping out of an airplane with a chicken and then getting really mad when your chicken gets shot, or doing what Jack Churchill's going to do here. We just went over there and killed everything. But the Brits are like, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to have fun doing it. Man. The Brits during World War II. I don't know. And what have you guys done since then? You created Warhammer. Anyway. He rejoins the army and was assigned back to the Manchester Regiment as part of the British Expeditionary Force, which is one of my favorite military terms, because just you tack on expeditionary force to it and it makes it sound like there's some great adventure that's about to be had. And yeah, you'd be right in this case. And then he goes to the worst place on earth for an Englishman, France. But he brought his bow with him. And not for decoration or uniform purposes. He used this thing on patrol because he's British and it's a longbow, and they kind of have genetic memory on how to use these things like appropriately. There's stories saying that he was accurate and lethal at 200 yards, which, if you know anything about English longbows, yes, it takes a lot of practice, but yeah, because there was, it's like with a modern compound bow, there's what's referred to as let off, meaning that because of how the bow is designed, where instead of just being a string on a stick, which is, I guess, kind of the most simplified way to explain a longbow, modern bows have cams where the strings run up through. And the way the cams are designed and shaped is so that when you pull back, you kind of hit a little bit of a wall, but once you roll past that, the tall end of the cam comes up. And for example, with my bow, I've got it set to like 75 pounds pullback. Once I get it pulled back, I'm only holding about 5 pounds because it's like 95% let off. So I could pull my bow back and walk around my yard and not even feel like it's there. English longbows, I think, were like 200 pounds, some of them. So these guys that were pulling these things back in combat and firing, an arrow the diameter of your pinky 500 yards down a field and impaling some dude that was out thatching his roof 6 days beforehand. Those guys their forearms were like the size of your thigh. And it wasn't like in the movies where you see them pull it back and hold it and aim it up and let go. This would have been kind of, you knock your arrow, you pull back, and once you hit your apex, you're letting go because you can't hold on to it because it's like pulling your own body weight plus. So accurate and lethal at 200 yards is absolutely possible. And the other thing that a bow has that a rifle doesn't is it is quiet, like silent in most cases. And it kind of comes down to again, we're going to get, weapons autism because, full disclosure, I've been doing archery for fun and like used to do it competitively. I started shooting when I was like, I think it was like 4 or 5 years old, and my dad got me my first bow. And up until recently, I've shot pretty regularly. Depending on your fletchings, which are like your feathers that would be on an arrow, depending on what the material those are made out of, you can be almost completely silent. God help you if you have like the rubber ones and they have a slight rip in it and you let go of it, because it'll sound like a airplane. But depending on what you're using, and if they're in good shape, dead quiet. Especially with like an older bow, like a recurve bow, kind of the same design as like a longbow, where you don't have wheels or cams making noise as they come back and then go forward. You don't have limb slap. You don't have any of that. It's just that's it. And then whatever you're throwing that chunk of wood at, or in modern cases, carbon fiber at, gets hit and runs off for a little bit. The only thing, now that I'm thinking about this, sorry for the rant here, but the only thing that could make a British longbow scarier would be if they had modern technology for broadheads like we do now. There's a company called Rage that's what my broadheads are when I have them on my bow. They make a model called the hypodermic, that they are a broadhead that looks it's just basically a field point, and it opens on impact. But when they open on impact, they open out to about, I don't know, a 2-inch hole. And one of the place where I bought my bow from, the guy had a bunch of like product videos for like, like vendor videos, I guess is what you'd call them. For you can watch this and explain to people how they work, yada yada yada. He's showing it to me on his phone. This guy shot a deer somewhere like out in the Midwest with one of these things, and the damage that this thing did to the deer, which I know sounds terrible, right? But with hunting with a rifle versus hunting with a bow is different, because hunting with a rifle, it's more about what kills the animal is like the kinetic energy of a bullet going through, and like basically like if you hit it in the heart, it just kind of goes like that and it explodes essentially. Whereas bow and arrow hunting is, you're counting more on blood loss, and the more that happens quicker, the quicker and more respectful of a death it is to the animal, so that it's not suffering, because that's bullshit. If you're out there to shoot animals to watch them suffer, you need to go to a hospital and check yourself in. Anyway, this thing, he hit a deer with it at like 20 yards, and it looked like somebody walked through like the snow with a bucket of red paint, just dumped it. The deer ran about 4 feet and just collapsed and died. So yeah, I can only imagine just taking like an English longbow with, again, an arrow the diameter of your pinky, and slapping one of those things on there and chucking it at like 140-pound peasant out there with a pitchfork that's been forced by whichever opposing king you're fighting to go out and fight you. And he's just, me lord, and he's got a hole the size of his own fist in his spine, and he's stuck to the ground. Yeah, that was kind of taking the back road to explaining that bow and arrow is quieter than a rifle, especially when you're on a patrol and you're trying to not alert people. So spring of 1940, the German war machine has started to like roll through Belgium and into France. And Churchill's company got caught up in the fighting retreat near the village of Epinette, which is outside of Bethune. His company was surrounded, and it's not really looking great for them. Most people in this situation would probably be looking for, a quiet, quick retreat to keep fighting another day. But we're not talking about most other people. We're talking about Jack Churchill. He gets his men into ambush positions and told them to quote, wait for my signal. And then climbed into a oh, I love this guy. And then climbed into a bell tower at the local church. Never told anybody what the signal would be, but they'd know it when they saw it. A column of German troops starts marching down Main Street through this town. Jack rises from his hiding spot in the bell tower draws his bow, and shot the sergeant in the front of the column directly in the chest in 1940 with a bow and arrow. Then after that, his voice just opened up and cut these guys to ribbons. This, by the way, is the last confirmed bow and arrow kill in British military history, which is unfortunate. I do know that since this event took place, I can think of a guy that has, I want to say, anywhere between 4 and 7 confirmed kills with an entrenching tool during the Korean War. And he may or may not be on the list. This could also potentially be, from what I could find, the last confirmed bow and arrow kill in modern military history anywhere on Earth. I know that, I think it was like the Philippines or Indonesia, like their SWAT teams have crossbows because it's considered a less lethal option, which is crazy to me. Because, like, you imagine just being some dude with a machete, like waving a machete around on the street, and the cops roll up and they pull out like shotguns and handguns. They're like, no, we need a less lethal option. If that's me and I see somebody pull a crossbow out of the trunk of their car, I'm done. No, thank you. Like, just shoot me with a rifle. I don't want to get shot with a bow and arrow. But after Robin Hooding this guy, he comes down from the tower and drew his claymore, which is technically a claybag because it's got the basket hilt. It's a Scottish broadsword, but instead of having just like the big cross hilt, it's got a basket hilt, which is good because then it protects your fingies so you don't get hit when, the Nazis pull their swords out to sword fight you. You maniac. So Jack Churchill is now standing in the middle of this street in France with a longbow on his back and a claymore in his hands, leading a counterattack. And his company fought off the Germans. They got themselves out of this encirclement that they were trapped in and make it back to British lines. Could not imagine being one of those German dudes and being like, war's going pretty good. I bet we'll be done with this by Christmas, which nobody will ever say that again in World War II for the next 5 years. And you're just like walking along, you're humming Edelweiss or something, then your leader gets shot in the throat with a goddamn arrow, and you go, what's going on here? And then this psycho just drops out of the sky with a sword and starts chasing you. No, I don't know if they make detergent strong enough to clean your pants after that. So at some point in this whole kerfuffle with the bow and arrow and a sword, he got shot in the shoulder. And he either didn't notice or didn't really care. A friend spotted him shortly after. Like, he's cranking out across the plains of Flanders on a little motorcycle with his bow tied to the frame, arrows sticking out of up where the windshield would be. He's got a German officer's cap hanging off the handlebars like a trophy, and his friend flags him down, and he rides by and says, "Hello, Clark," and asked him if he had anything to drink, and he's like, "No, but like, you're bleeding." It's like, "Oh yeah, I got shot by a German machine gun." Like he had stubbed his toe on the coffee table in the middle of the night. That probably would have bothered him more. I think I'd rather get hit with a German machine gun than stub my toe on anything. Jack would be awarded his first military cross during this retreat for hooking 6 trucks together to try to salvage a disabled British tank. Couldn't actually save the tank, but in the process, he did save a wounded British officer. What I forgot to mention was that this little retreat that just sounds like it'd be, whatever, we're just trying to get away from the Germans. No, this is the retreat to Dunkirk, which, thankfully, Hitler did not listen to people that knew what they were doing better than him. Had Hitler listened to, I believe it was Heinz Guderian, and finished the Brits off at Dunkirk, this war would have been over and the world would have been a pretty different place from where we're at now. Anyway, so Jack Churchill makes it to Dunkirk, and then he makes it back to England. And somewhere along the lines, he hears a rumor about a new unit being put together called the Commandos. He volunteered immediately because it sounded fun. He goes north to Scotland by train, which is also where he would meet and fall in love with a nurse named Rosamund Margaret Denny at the Dumbarton Hospital, which Dumbarton sounds familiar for some reason. Anyway, her grandfather was actually a pretty well-known naval architect. The two got married at St. Augustine's Church in Dumbarton on March 8th, 1941. It would eventually have two sons. One of them sounds almost like he has the exact same name as his dad, but they just like shuffled it together. Malcolm John Leslie Churchill was born November 1942, and Rodney Alistair Gladstone Churchill was born in 1947. So his wife probably didn't realize at the time that she is marrying one of the most insane people in the history of the British military. And she kind of just has to go with it, and she did. And it was for the best. So he goes to Scotland. He completes the commando training. He's really good at it because, of course, he is. He's good at everything he does. He's one of those guys where, like, modern day, if this was somebody that you knew, you'd hate him because he just picks everything up super easily. He's really good at everything immediately. He's probably 6'4", makes like $2 million a year just like doing whatever. He's got perfect teeth. He's one of these guys, except for the perfect teeth thing because he's English. But it's one of these people that like he's just so good at stuff that you can't help but not like him. But at the same time, you like him because he's awesome. But yeah, I mean, the standards today are different because you'd be like, oh, I hate this guy because like, because we're weird. But everything's competition. His first commando mission, I don't know if he got to name this or if it was named randomly, and because God has a sense of humor, he went, I'm putting Jack in this one. Operation Archery. That took place in Vogsoy Island off the coast of Norway, where the Germans had a fish oil processing plant. And you'd think that's probably a boring target, right? Because like, oh no, we're going to stop the Germans from having like no joint pain and stuff. No. Fish oil was actually like pretty crucial to manufacturing explosives for the Germans. So blowing this up is going to make things a little bit harder for our German friends. But more importantly, not only is this going to make their life difficult, this is going to draw attention away from other fronts that the Germans are fighting on. Because they're getting hit in Norway, so we have to pull guys from, I don't know, maybe France, to send them to Norway to protect these other places. Jack would find himself positioned on the lead landing craft, and as they approach the shore, he notices that his men are very nervous. So he decides he knows exactly what he needs to do. He needs to soothe the men's nerves. He needs to calm these guys down. But at the same time, has to get them ready for a fight. So instead of standing up in front of his men and giving some Braveheart-esque speech, he grabs his bagpipes and starts playing March of the Cameron Men, full volume, into the Norwegian fjords in the dark as they're approaching for a combat landing. Maybe he's going to get lucky. Maybe the Germans think it's some kind of like swamp troll coming out after them and they're going to run off. But no. When the ramp dropped, he slings the pipes, draws his sword, and screams at the top of his lungs, "Commandos!" and then charged the German positions throwing grenades. British High Command received the following telegram 2 hours later. Quote, Malloy Battery and Island captured. Casualties slight. Demolitions in progress. Churchill. When he says casualties slight, he means they lost 17 men. They killed 120 Germans and took 96 prisoners, leading his men to a 40-1 kill ratio, and playing bagpipes and whipping grenades into German machine gun nests isn't even the most impressive thing that he did while he was in Norway. One night he went out and captured a German sentry and used him as a human shield and walked from post to post with sword in hand and systematically convinced 42 German soldiers to surrender just by being very loud and very confident, and having a sword helps too. His explanation of how this worked was, quote, "I maintain that as long as you tell a German loudly and clearly what to do, if you are senior to him, he will get on with it enthusiastically and efficiently, whatever the situation." The Germans are nothing if not efficient, As a direct result of Operation Archery, Hitler redirected 30,000 troops from France to Norway because he's a little worried, kind of nervous, that this is just the lead up to something bigger happening in Norway. Yeah, so they redeployed 30,000 men for nothing because nothing else really happened there. Now, a couple years pass fairly uneventfully, and then we find our friend Jack in Italy fighting across Sicily. He and a single corporal snuck up on a German patrol. He introduced the Germans to his claymore up close and personal, and then marched these men around the German observation post at sword point until every single soldier had surrendered and been captured, to the tune of about 45 men. No shots fired. He's just real good at what he does. He's very good with a sword. So he's done everything he needs to do in Italy. He's bored. He requests a transfer to now what is formerly known as Yugoslavia. His commanding officer was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? You've already been a menace here. You may as well continue your European tour." He was tasked with taking point 622 on the island of Brac, which is out in the Adriatic Sea. It's a well-fortified German stronghold surrounded by minefields, barbed wire, and other defenses. So they attacked under cover of darkness. And because it would be unfair to send Jack Churchill and a bunch of commandos up here to fight 1,000 Germans, he has to even the playing field. And about halfway up the mountain, he whips his bagpipes out and starts playing again. This resulted in about 6 of the commandos actually making it to the top of point 622. Of course, Jack's one of them, or else our story ends there. And it's not nearly over yet. There's still a lot of Germans up there, right? And they eventually would kill all of the other commandos, minus Jack. Jack's alone. He's surrounded, and he did what anybody in his position would do. He sits down, pulls the bagpipes around, and starts playing "Will Ye No Come Back Again" on the bagpipes. Not a very uplifting song, and he's playing it very loudly. He's playing it as mortars are exploding all around him. Bullets are snapping past his head. He's literally sitting there waiting to die, but he wants to die playing his pipes. And eventually, a German mortar round hit close enough, and it silenced the pipes for good. The Germans finally got there. They are examining the area, checking for any survivors. And they find some bodies, and obviously they poke them with rifles. Nobody moves. One of them jammed a Mauser into Jack's temple. Another grabbed his dog tags and told the first one, "Hey, we need to stop." Because for some reason, that divine intervention, we're going to call it, because his work here is not done yet. Jack Churchill's not dead. But remember the whole, Churchill being his last name thing? May have mentioned it a couple of times right here. The Germans think that they have captured the brother of the Prime Minister of England. Because, believe it or not, Winston Churchill has a brother named Jack. They're not related whatsoever. It's two completely different families, no shared blood at all. Just a happy coincidence that there happens to be two Jack Churchills, and one of them is the person that they think they have. But they have the more dangerous Jack Churchill in their grasp at the moment. And honestly, even if it had been Winston Churchill's brother, he wouldn't have lifted a finger to end the war over a family member at all. Not how it would have worked. So at this point in the war, Hitler has issued what's called the Commando Order. Basically, anybody found to be dressed like or participating with anything with British commandos, especially commandos, was to be executed on the spot because they had become a giant pain in his ass because they were so good at what they did. So they are ready to kill this man, right? Until a Wehrmacht captain by the last name of Thuner, being a decent guy, tells him, no, you can't kill him, because first of all, he may be the Prime Minister of England's brother, and eventually this war is going to end. And if it ends and we still have him, if he's still alive, maybe that will buy us some goodwill. Who knows? Also, he's not super cool with executing prisoners. He told Jack, quote, "You're a soldier, as am I. I refuse to allow these civilian butchers to deal with you. I shall say nothing of having received this order." So again, I've said it before, just because they were Germans in World War II doesn't necessarily mean they were bad people. This dude ignored a direct order from Hitler because he didn't want to execute unarmed prisoners. Yeah, that's a pretty decent person, I would imagine. After the war, Jack personally tracked Thuner down and killed him. I'm kidding. He tracked him down and thanked him for helping to keep him out of what would have been... So spoiler alert, Jack's about to go camping, right? But because of what Thuner did, Jack didn't end up in being possessed by the Soviets, which after the war would have been a really bad place to be. Previous to the war, being in Russia and being Soviet would probably be a pretty bad place to be too, but that's okay. So that's a detail that doesn't really show up in a lot of stories about Jack, but it should, because it shows the kind of person that he really was. Like, yeah, he's a maniac and he's killing dudes with swords and bows and arrows and stuff and playing bagpipes and giving his position away and getting a bunch of people killed. But he's still a good dude, you know? So, here's where stuff gets interesting. Jack is cared for, given medical aid, and then shipped off to Sachsenhausen, which is 35 kilometers north of Berlin. Sachsenhausen is a concentration camp, believe it or not. 200,000 people went into that camp over the course of the war, and half of them didn't leave. Jack was chained to the floor for the first month that he was there. This was a different kind of camp because this was not necessarily just a extermination camp. This was also a POW camp. So he got treated pretty not well. His escape partners, because this is where we're going from here, included several veterans of the Stalag Luft 3, which is another camp. These guys were involved with something that would become known as the Great Escape, which is going to happen at some point because it's such a wild-ass story. Between that and Colditz, those are two of the... Honestly, man, World War II, those are probably top three, like two of the top three prison escapes of World War II. Because you'd also have to throw like the Bielskis in there, who are the Polish Jews that were sneaking into concentration camps to sneak people out, which is crazy. So some of his escape buddies include Bertram James, Sidney Dowse, Harry Day, a man known as Johnny the Artful Dodger Dodge. And these guys have already escaped from a handful of German prison camps, and that's why they're there. They had escaped from so many prison camps that the Gestapo had basically given up trying to figure out how they're doing it. They're just like, throw their hands in there, like, we don't know how they did it, but they did it again. Just find a different one to see if they can escape from this one. These guys ended up digging a tunnel and getting out of here. They're 35 miles from Berlin. Jack and one companion head north towards the coast. They got within 3 miles of the water. You can picture it, okay? 3 miles from the ocean, you can smell the salt water. You can almost taste it. You're that close. And then they get recaptured. And this time, Jack got sent to Dachau, which, not great. Thankfully for him, he wasn't there for very long because he was then transported south into Austria with other high-value prisoners. And once he gets to this new prison camp with all these other high-value prisoners, there's a night that the floodlights just stopped working. Jack stood up, walked out, and just started heading south. He walked out of a POW camp. He survived on stolen vegetables. He crossed the Alps near the Brenner Pass on a sprained ankle. On the 8th day of, oh man, on the 8th day of walking, he spotted a column of vehicles moving through the Po Valley in northern Italy. He escaped from Austria over the Alps into Italy in 8 days with a really badly sprained ankle and a pocket full of stolen carrots. But this column of vehicles, he sees them before they see him, so he's obviously going to take a little bit of caution here. Until he sees the hulls. He sees the sides of these vehicles and sees the white star of the United States Army. He kind of just like walks out into the middle of the road and in his own words delivered, quote, a credible Sandhurst salute, which may have done the trick. And the American crew, who are confronted with a filthy, bearded, limping British colonel, are like, hi, who are you and how did you get here? And then he's like, oh, no big deal. I just walked across the Alps. And they're like, sweet, hop in. We'll get you out of here. His immediate thought upon being debriefed about the European war wrapping up was, quote, and this is a word, there's a word in here, okay, that a lot of people are going to go, I don't know if you can say that. I'm going to say it anyway, okay, because it's technically, I mean, it is sort of a slur, I guess. But the more I learned about it, the more I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. So he's upset that the European half of the war is wrapping up. And he wants to go fight the Japanese. And he says, quote, however, there are still the nips, aren't there? And nips would be a shortened version of Nippon, which I believe is what people in Japan actually call Japan. Because I know if you watch, if you're a baseball fan, and you see any of these Japanese players come over, like usually in their first season, it'll say like stats in NPB, which is Nippon Professional Baseball League. It's no different than calling them Japs, I guess. I mean, it's just funnier because you get to say nips. So he requests a transfer to Burma. And he got to Burma. And he was there for a few months gearing up for what promised to be just the ass stomping of the century on his part, because he's Jack Churchill and he's going to fight everybody. Except he didn't get a chance to, because we ended the war with a couple of unconventional weapons, and the Japanese surrendered. Upon hearing about the Japanese surrender, Jack Churchill responded with, quote, if it weren't for the bloody Yanks, we could have kept this war going for 10 more years. This is a man who was born centuries too late. He should have been fighting the Danish with swords and axes in like 980. He would have been just as happy there as he was here. Seeing Harold Hardrada showing up and being like, I smell bitch, and just like chasing a bunch of like bearded Vikings down and killing them with a rock. Same energy. He's that guy. He spent the better part of 6 years being shot, mortared, stabbed with bayonets, blown up, chained to a floor of a concentration camp, recaptured, shipped to a worse concentration camp, forced to walk across the Alps on a bad ankle, and I'm sure to his probably disgust having to be rescued by the Americans, and I'm sure that didn't sit well with him. And then he's got the disappointment of knowing that the war in Asia is over too. He's been inconvenienced, and he's not happy with that. After Burma, he was posted to Mandatory Palestine, which is no longer Palestine. If you catch my drift, it's been redistributed to other people. And here he's second in command of the 1st Battalion of the Highland Light Infantry. It's 1948, and things are extremely violent. Glad to see some things don't change in the world. And the British Mandate is coming to an end. In May, a Jewish medical convoy made up of ambulances, trucks, buses, doctors, nurses, patients, students was ambushed by Arab fighters on a narrow street in Jerusalem, near a small HLI detachment called Tony's Post. Jack, having heard about this, rolls up to the scene in an open-topped armored car. He calls for 2 heavy armored vehicles to be sent to him, and they were on their way, but they're taking way too long for Jack's liking. People are dying. We got shooting in the streets, so Jack Churchill is going to do what Jack Churchill's going to do. So he kind of looks around and sees what he's got going for him and puts together something in his head. He's got a large armored personnel carrier, an open-topped Bren gun carrier, a small police armored car with a machine gun, and that's about it. Doesn't sound like a lot. And he goes, we ball, and drove them into the firefight. Then he got out of the vehicle and walked down the length of the burning convoy with a walking stick while he's being shot at, in full dress uniform, with his kilt, his Glengarry bonnet, red and white dice stockings, red and white checkered stockings, his Sam Brown belt, white spats. He is in full dress. And he's trying to evacuate people to his carrier. Which, as someone who owns a kilt or two, I can tell you, and again, from experience, trying to pick a person up wearing a kilt can be tricky. Because, it can get caught in the backs of your knees. If you squat down too far, you can step on it. You don't want to do that. Convoy's doctor thanked him and said, "We got this under control. Haganah's coming." So Haganah was basically like a Jewish militia in the area. So Jack walked down every vehicle in that convoy making the same offer, and nobody took it. One of his own men was very badly wounded during this whole thing. He pulled his vehicle back and provided covering fire for the next several hours while the convoy burned before anybody got there. Oh, and by the way, Haganah did not show up at all. So these people that have turned down his help because their people are on the way have nobody coming to help them, except for the guy that's already there. Just saying. In that situation, if somebody offered me help, I wouldn't be picky. I'd just be taking it and being like, yeah, great. You have guns. So do these guys. Help sounds good. But because we have to be picky, 79 people died in the street. Jack Churchill, 12 men, and 1 open-topped armored carrier were not enough to stop the slaughter that was coming. A few weeks later, he coordinated the full evacuation of about 700 Jewish doctors, nurses, students, and patients from the Hadassah Hospital and the Hebrew University on Mount Scopus, which had been completely cut off by Palestinians from the rest of Jerusalem. So the first time he got there, he offered to get them out, and they said no. He came back again, and they're like, no, we're good. And he went, nope, everybody get in trucks. I'm getting you out of here. Because he's not going to deal with that again. He's not going to let more people die because they don't want his help. I'm here to help you, and I'm going to help you whether you like it or not. So his war in what is now Israel has come to an end. The Brits have apparently run out of war zones to send him to. So they send him to Australia as an instructor at the Land Air Warfare School in Queensland. At this point in time, he's in his mid-40s. He's like 46, 47 years old. And because he's in Australia, what do you think he does? That's right. He picks up surfing in his mid-40s. And again, because he's Jack Churchill and he picked up a hobby, he is immediately getting good at it. He got so into it that he actually started designing and building his own surfboards. In 1955, at the age of 49, he became the first person in history to surf the tidal bore of the River Severn. He had a 5-foot wave that traveled up the river inland from the Bristol Channel. And he did this on a handmade 14-foot board. Just because he could. Because why not? I mean, he's already stormed beaches in Norway with bagpipes and killed a bunch of Germans in pillboxes with grenades. Oh, that's after he was in France and impaled a man with an arrow and then jumped out of a watchtower and chased a bunch of Germans around with a sword. Why not? Oh, and then, I don't know, got sent to 2 different concentration camps, so why not become good at surfing? This is absolutely insane. Oh, and then he fought in a losing battle in mandatory Palestine where he had to watch people die and wasn't super cool with that. And this is the point where somewhere in between being in Palestine and Australia, he was in another movie that I mentioned before, Ivanhoe, as an archer. And then, he just kind of went to Australia and started doing what they wanted him to do there. And then also, just because he could, at the age of 40, made his first parachute jump while all of this stuff was going on too. And at one point in time, he became the only officer in British military history to command both a commando battalion and a parachute battalion. This man is unstoppable. He retired from the Army in 1959 at the age of 53. Just because he's retired doesn't mean that he's going to be any less crazy, though. In retirement, he and Rosamond sailed coal-fired steamships on the Thames. Just, for something to do. He built radio-controlled model warships. He raced them on ponds. So, yeah, the remote-control warships are cool. That's fun. What's even funnier, though, is every day on his commute train home from the city, he waited until the train passed his backyard. Not really all that important of a detail. Until I tell you, it's because he had his window open on the train. And every day, when the train got right near his backyard, he'd just chuck his briefcase out the window and throw it into the backyard. He explained to the conductors who were like, what are you doing this for? He told them, I'm doing this because I don't have time to carry it home with me from the station. So I have to walk home from the station anyway. This briefcase is going to slow me down if I bring it all the way there. So I just chuck it out the window, because why not? So yeah, people kind of gained the idea that he might be a little eccentric, because they probably didn't know anything about what he did during the war that would have made them go, oh no, he is absolutely a weirdo. Jack Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill died March 8th, 1996 in Surrey, England. He was 89 years old, and he died peacefully at home, surrounded by his family, which was most certainly not how he probably ever imagined dying. Again, this is a guy who probably would have excelled 500, 1,000 years before he lived, just as some kind of pre-Anglo-Saxon warlord in England, you know? I could totally have seen that. And again, I know I need to cover more Americans from World War II. And I will, I promise. But there's something about the British that are just, they were insane in World War II, and it's so much fun to talk about. Because this is like the kind of stuff that you could tell somebody at a bar, and they're like, nah, that's not true. That's not real. It sure is. Yeah, there's a lot of actual resources and information and firsthand accounts of the crazy shit that the Brits did during World War II. And also, World War II is like markedly more fun to talk about than World War I. Because I feel like whenever I talk about World War I, it's just like, it's sad. Because that was a war that really didn't have to happen, honestly. But this one was like, yeah, there's a guy being an asshole in Germany, so we need to do something about that. Oh, and the Japanese? Yeah, we'll take care of them too. They just did some crazy shit. It's so much fun. I'm sure it wasn't fun at the time, but it's fun to talk about now and to like almost like build mythological characters out of some of these people because they could have been. But anyway, we got one episode left. That's it for the season. Then I'm not sure how season 3 is going to start. Don't know. Because season 1 started with a British psychopath from World War II. I have a type. Then this one started with space disasters. So I don't know. Maybe I'll start off with some kind of wild true crime or crime against humanity of some sort. We'll figure something out. I got time. But if you enjoyed what if you enjoy what I'm doing here, if you want to hear it early, go over to Patreon, patreon.com/1159media. $5 a month gets you early access to History Goon. Gets you early access and backdoor access to 911 calls with the operator, and the Never Daily with Sam and I think it's Katie. Pretty sure it's Katie. I need to pay attention closer. Also gets you early access and backdoor access to Guestnicity with Luther. And I'm working very hard to make sure that I can get some actual Patreon exclusive stuff for my show up for you guys. It'll be more bite-sized. It won't be an hour and a half long. I'm talking probably like 15, 20 minutes, like drive time length stuff. But I'm working on it. I've got some stuff that I've got listed out that I want to do. So now I just need to have time to research and record it. And once I get there, you'll have it. I promise. If you want to support me directly, I have a Ko-Fi. It's ko-fi.com/historygoonpod. Any money you want to throw there goes directly to me as the creator, and it's greatly appreciated. If you don't want to do that, tell people about the show. Subscribe. I've got a YouTube. Hop on there. Subscribe to that. Everything helps there too. Yeah, just spread the word. And tell people you like. Tell people you don't like. Tell them to check out the show. It's not bad. It's pretty okay, I've heard. But until next week, when we meet again for the final time of the season, we're all going to die someday. So go out and do some goon shit and leave a mark on the world. Just like Jack Churchill. Okay. Love you. Bye.